Hello, and welcome to the 23rd session in our webinar series with the Alliance for Water Efficiency. WaterSense and AWE started the series in 2015. The goal is to reach the different audiences that have a role in ensuring outdoor water efficiency, including landscape professionals, local governments, and water utilities. We've had 22 successful webinars to date, many of which highlighted how local governments and the outdoor industry are working together to reach consumers. All of our webinars have been recorded and are available for on-demand viewing for those who are not able to join us during the live session. Let's cover a few housekeeping topics before we get started. All attendees were muted when they entered the webinar to minimize background noise. To ask questions, you can type those in the Q&A box located in your control bar at the top of your screen, and we will answer those questions at the end of the webinar. A recording of this presentation will be available on the WaterSense website and AWE's YouTube channel following the presentation. We'd now like to hear from you and take a few polls. Who do we have on the call today? So let us know if you're local or state government, an irrigation professional, a water utility, university or university extension service, or if you don't fall in any of these categories, you can go ahead and select other. All right, so it looks like most of you are joining us as water utilities and then local and state government, some irrigation professionals, and some other. Thanks so much for sharing. And our next poll question, what part of the country are you calling from? So let us know if you're in the West, the Southwest, the Midwest, the Southeast, or the Northeast. All right, so it looks like almost everyone is calling from the West and the Southwest. I'm in the West too. I'm calling from Reno, Nevada. And thank you so much for letting us know where you're calling from. So today's topic is drought resilience through turf reduction and water resource management. Our featured speaker, JC Davis, will discuss the Southern Nevada Water Authority's drought resilience efforts. JC manages the Southern Nevada Water Authority's Enterprise Conservation Division. He's an analyst and communication professional with more than 25 years of experience, and he earned degrees in journalism and management from San Diego State University. During his tenure with Las Vegas's Regional Water Agency, he has developed and implemented numerous engagement programs and policies related to water conservation, water resource development, environmental management, water quality protection, rate structures, and infrastructure reinvestment. JC is a longtime member of the American Water Works Association and served on the organization's Public Affairs Council. Sarah Lavoya is also joining us today. She is the Environmental Protection Specialist for the WaterSense Outdoor Program. She works with the technical team on new outdoor specifications and coordinates with professional certifying organizations to develop resources to promote water efficient practices with industry and the public. She has a master's degree in public affairs and environmental science, both focusing on water resource management from Indiana University and a bachelor's degree from the Ohio State University. And Liesl Hans is joining us from the Alliance for Water Efficiency. Liesl joined AWE in April 2022 and focuses on program leadership and management, knowledge development, and fostering partnerships and collaborations while serving a collective of amazing water conservation and efficiency organizations and professionals. Liesl was previously the Water Conservation Manager at Fort Collins Utilities in Fort Collins, Colorado, leading a team that continues to improve and build programs, policies, education, and incentives to help the community do more with less. Prior to this, she worked at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory on energy policy, behavioral research, and the energy water nexus. She received her PhD in economics from Colorado State University, where she focused on water and energy, behavioral economics, and was a board member of the City of Fort Collins Water Board. And now I'll turn the presentation over to Sarah.
Great, thank you. Hello, good morning or good afternoon. In light of the recent holiday, and as we near the end of Native American Heritage Month, I would like to share my gratitude towards all of the Indigenous peoples in my life and those of you who might be joining us today. I would also like to add that I'm giving this presentation on the ancestral lands of the Anacostan and the Piscataway Conoy peoples. Now, I'm assuming if you've joined our call today, you are well aware of the ongoing drought throughout the US. I know most of you said you were either from the West or Southwest. So here on your screen, you can see the drought status of the US as of early November, and there's clearly a lot of orange and red, indicating at least a severe drought. We can also see with the inclusion of that light orange and the yellow that there is about 70% of the US currently experiencing some degree of drought. And sadly, due to climate change, these trends are going to become more common and standard. The impacts of drought are going to be felt more frequently and likely with increasing severity and duration. With these growing trends, the need to address drought and build resiliency into our communities is now more important than ever. Next slide, please. So why do we care about drought, particularly in the water world? It might seem pretty straightforward, but first and foremost, drought directly impacts water supply. Now on your screen, you can see stream flow percentiles across the US overlaid on the drought map seen previously on this slide. There is currently a notable drop in stream flow out east and of course around drought trends within the California, Nevada, and central US areas. Many of these rivers, especially west of the Mississippi, have been fully allocated, meaning all of the water we think we can reasonably take out of the river has been assigned to some use. This means any decrease in stream flow will place additional stress on water utilities that are already struggling to meet demand. This strain can lead to a loss of water supply, a decrease in water quality, increased competition for additional sources of water, like groundwater, and an increased cost of water. In addition to our own personal uses for water, water is a cornerstone for many other industries, including agriculture, energy, and manufacturing. One of the best ways to mitigate these widespread impacts of drought is by controlling the demand for water. Building resiliency into our communities to decrease water loss and increase water efficiency can not only ensure a personal and safe supply of water, but also contribute to healthier ecosystems and stronger economies. Next slide, please. So one of the best ways to mitigate water demand is to manage how we use it outdoors. Currently, as much as 50% of water used outdoors is lost. These losses can be attributed to a lack of efficiency caused by poor irrigation system design, improper system installment, lack of maintenance, and improper scheduling. When we make our systems more efficient, we use less water, and in doing so, provide much needed relief to water utilities and ecosystems sourcing our water. For this reason, managing our outdoor water use is a critical tool to managing drought. Here at WaterSense, we believe in a holistic approach to water management in the landscape. An efficient landscape is a combination of management practices, design, and products that make sense for your landscape and your intended use for the space. Next slide, please. So to meet your landscape goals, please visit the WaterSense website where we have numerous resources to make your landscape both functional and water efficient. In addition to our labeled products and Find a Pro contractor listing, we have specific resources focused on landscape management and drought education. So I encourage you all to poke around and check it out. The website you can see in your bottom right-hand corner. And yeah, without, I guess, further ado, I will pass it on to Lisa with updates from AWE.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. This is Lisa. Just a little bit about the Alliance for Water Efficiency. We're a fantastic network of professionals that are committed to the sustainable use of water. We'd love for you to join us if you're not already a member. We, for example, have an education outreach committee that develops our webinar topics and helps influence ones like this and shares resources like drought communications, bill inserts, things like that. We also have a research committee, which helps identify research needs for the industry. And I'm going to highlight a few of those resources related to today's topic next. Next slide, please. So here are a couple of items. First was some recent research around irrigation restrictions, which is part of our overall outdoor water savings initiative. So a variety of studies that went into that one. The executive summary is available to all. And here are a few nuggets of what came out of that research, but largely highlighted that you need mandatory restrictions to make a difference in a short-term water shortage situation. And those do have a potentially pretty big impact on overall water use as well as peak demand, as most of the restrictions naturally focus on outdoor watering first. Campaigns and plans with more robust messaging and enforcement systems were more effective, and how water use rebounds after you have a period of drought with water restrictions. It really depends on what you maintain moving forward. Some communities that then adopted more consistent restrictions or watering schedules saw savings maintain after their initial shortage. Others that did not keep anything saw that water use would rebound some. The next one down there is the considerations for drought in a changing world. This was in partnership with San Antonio Water System, but is generally applicable. This just has a variety of drought response examples, lots of different ways that organizations across the US have approached it, and general considerations for how to approach drought planning and what types of components you might include. And this is a free resource that anyone can find online. Next slide, please. The Alliance for Water Efficiency maintains a whole suite of resources related to finance and rates on our website, Financing Sustainable Water. And so one example is the sales forecasting and rate model, which in the context of drought, you could do some scenario planning to see how you might consider designing regular and or incorporating drought surcharges or different types of rate structure components to better weather the storm, so to speak. And then finally, here's a resource from Australia's Millennium Drought, bringing together a variety of lessons learned and the way that water providers in Australia managed through that pretty intense and long drought. This is also publicly available. Next slide, please. And I won't take up any more of your time, but please reach out with questions or to share the great work that you all are working on. We're always looking for new webinar topics to share out the great content and the great work that's all out there. So I will pass it over to JC. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is JC Davis. We are an AWE member. And just for the benefit of those who aren't familiar with the Southern Nevada Water Authority, which is likely a lot of you on the call, we are not a direct-to-customer water purveyor. Rather, we are the regional agency responsible for water resource acquisition and management, as well as water treatment. And so there are some unique things about our community, and I'll talk about them a little bit. So there are some things that I'll say that won't be applicable in your communities. There are other things that hopefully will be useful. And so we'll try to go through those during the presentation and, of course, during the Q&A. The first thing, and I know a lot of you are from the West and Southwest, but even within our own community, as I've engaged stakeholders, I don't think a lot of people fully appreciate just how dry Southern Nevada is. I mean, there are deserts and there are deserts, and that's become important when we talk about the kinds of things that we need people to do to live compatibly in our environment. Because as you can see on this chart, Tucson and Phoenix, which we also think of as deserts, right? But it's a much more verdant desert, get substantially more rainfall every year than we do. And so if it's going to live in our environment, it's because you irrigate it. Go ahead. So we're kind of a one-trick pony. We do have a local groundwater aquifer, but 90% of our water supply is derived from Lake Mead, which originates in the Colorado River, with the majority of that coming on the western reaches of the Rocky Mountains. And so we are inextricably tied to what happens on the Colorado. Go ahead, please. And a lot of people know that our allocation was set, actually 100 years ago this year. And even though there's now a couple million people living in this community, you don't get to go back and ask for more, because in order for us to get more water, somebody else would have to get less. And of the 7 states and the country of Mexico that share the river with us, nobody is inclined to take less water than they're already getting, even though we're all sort of staring down the barrel of shortage right now. Go ahead, please. So as you can see, this is color coded for your convenience. Blue is good, red is bad. You kind of get the idea. We're in for another below average runoff year in the Colorado River system. And as a result, collectively, we are trillions of gallons short on what had been the historic runoff in the river system over these past 20 years. These past 2 decades have not been kind to us. Go ahead, please. What we are worried about, because we actually have substantial water reserves that we've been amassing over the past couple of decades as we've seen this coming. What we worry about is a condition called Deadpool. And if we have to worry about it, any of you who are working in Arizona and California really need to be worrying about it, because at Deadpool, we are certainly going to see an allocation cut, and it hasn't been defined yet. It could be pretty severe. But California and Arizona are going to see their Colorado River allocations drop to 0 because you can't release any water downstream from Hoover Dam. So at that point, you're down in the bottom of the lake. You're under 10%. For context, I think we're at about 27 or 28% right now. Our first 2 intakes have surfaced at that point. Fortunately, when we saw these conditions coming, we invested more than $1 billion burrowing underneath Lake Mead and popping up from the bottom like a drain plug and building a low lake level pumping station, so that even at Deadpool, we have access to water for our critical needs. And this will make more sense in a second. Hoover Dam obviously is out of business. In fact, it won't have to wait for 900 to lose generation power. And again, that last one is that there are rules, as I'll talk about here in a second, for what happens at different elevations in terms of shortages. Those rules are not written or even negotiated for what happens at Deadpool. So we don't know how bad things are going to get. Go ahead, please. And this is the slide that frankly is the most depressing slide in the entire deck, because what that shows is we don't believe, and the Bureau of Reclamation, which runs the Colorado River, doesn't believe that we're looking at a short-term phenomenon. A lot of what you see when you look at what communities are doing is about drought response. Well, drought denotes that there's going to be an end at some point, that things are going to be better and back to normal. According to all the projections that we have seen, things aren't going to get good again like in my lifetime. This is just what our world looks like now. That image you see on the bottom right is actually our first intake, which has now officially surfaced. So our original intake that we relied on for more than 3 decades is out of commission, and our second one isn't far behind. So it's really a good thing that we built a third intake. And in fact, it was controversial at the time because we already had 2, and they said, oh, this is a government boondoggle. What are you doing spending so much money on building an intake? We would be evacuating if we had not invested in that third intake, because we wouldn't have any way to get water out of Lake Mead. So unfortunately, you can see the shortage thresholds in the 3 horizontal lines. We're going to plunge right through that. And by 2026, potentially, we could be looking at Deadpool. Go ahead, please. Now, we do have advantages, and that's the reason that a lot of us like me haven't sold our houses yet. One of our advantages, which is really unique among major metropolitan areas, is that we capture and recover almost all of our indoor water. The next closest that I'm aware of is Singapore, and they're in about the 80% range. They capture and recover their indoor water. we get more than 99% of it because of our proximity to Lake Mead. So if it goes down a drain anywhere, whether it's in my house or in our offices over here or in a hotel room on the strip, if it goes down a drain, it gets sent to a regional wastewater treatment facility, treated up to Clean Water Act standards for those of you who are in that line of work, and then sent down through a wetlands for further polishing and returned to Lake Mead. And so we get a gallon for gallon credit for everything that we send back to the lake. So essentially, we're a perpetual motion machine. However, we're only a perpetual motion machine for water used indoors, water that goes down a drain and ends up at water reclamation facilities. And so in one way, it's fantastic, right? Because you don't have to worry about your critical indoor uses. In the other way, it's fairly limiting because the suite of things that you can do to reduce demand is effectively limited to those consumptive water uses. Go ahead, please. So another advantage that we have, as I talked about, is that we burrowed underneath the lake and popped out from the bottom. And because of that, and we are augmenting our treatment because we know that contaminants are going to be concentrated when you get down to the very bottom of the lake. So we've taken all of the technical steps that you need to in order to securitize the water supply. So when push comes to shove and we go to Deadpool, and I honestly believe it is not whether we go to Deadpool, but when we go to Deadpool, we are going to be the most water secure community in the Southwest. Go ahead, please. The third and final thing, and I can't put too much emphasis on this, and if any of you are from the Atlanta area, feel free to pipe in during the Q&A, is that if everybody isn't willing to play by one set of rules, you cannot have an effective demand management or conservation, or however you like to refer to it, program, because people will just go jurisdiction shopping to do the thing that they want to do in order to ignore water resources. And I'll talk about it in a second, but we've actually encountered this recently and have been able to overcome it because the Water Authority has representatives from all of the local jurisdictions. And so therefore, they have a seat at every table and they have an opportunity to vote down a thing. But if the Water Authority Board of Directors approve it, there is a tacit understanding that all of the member agencies will also approve that thing. And that makes it really useful to have uniformity of policy in whatever jurisdiction you're operating here in Southern Nevada. Go ahead, please. All right, so we've done a lot with not nearly as much, and pretty much all of the low-hanging fruit is gone at this point in terms of conservation. But it's a noteworthy achievement. I mean, we've increased our population by almost 50% since 2002. But during that same 20 years, our Colorado River water consumption, that consumptive use that we don't get back, is down more than 25%. So in other words, we're serving a lot more people with a lot less water than we used to, just by everybody tightening their belt a little bit. And these haven't been draconian measures. These haven't been things that really adversely affected people's lifestyle. These are just common sense measures. Earlier, there was mentioned the idea of mandatory watering restrictions. Those are permanent here. This time of year, you can only irrigate 1 day per week. And we have water waste patrols all over the valley. We have agreements with the local jurisdictions, and we will fee people for violating the mandatory watering restrictions. Go ahead, please. It's an interesting thing. I spent most of the last year talking with stakeholders about some policies we're making related to evaporative cooling, which I'll talk about in a second. It's kind of a big deal here. And they seem to think that, well, evaporative cooling works really well in the Southwest, so we should just use it. And it does, by the way. Evaporative cooling in a hot, low humidity climate is fantastic in terms of its effectiveness. However, doing it in a water scarce environment is just not a luxury we have. And so if you think about how we're changing the way that people build things, how they develop, all we're doing is recognizing the environment in which we're operating, right? So if you were living in a hurricane zone, you would have construction codes that accounted for that. If you're living in an earthquake zone, you would have construction codes that account for that. And that's what we are applying to our community, our codes that say, look, if you want to operate in this environment, here are the rules, and here's why it has to be this way. And it's taken a little while, but we've gotten people on board with that concept. Go ahead, please. All right, so effectively, there are 5 major uses of water that cannot be recovered. You'll notice that I don't list water system losses. We have one of the tightest water systems in the United States, frankly, in the world, and we invest hundreds of millions of dollars keeping it that way. We have a very, very low water loss rating here in Southern Nevada, and it's because we just can't afford for any of the water that we have and treat to not get to the end user customers. And so we put a lot of effort into that side. So the 5 categories that we just can't get back, number 1 with a bullet, landscape irrigation. And I'll talk about it in a second, what some of the things that we're doing, but that is the single largest by a lot consumptive use of water. So remember, non-recoverable, can't get it back through a drain, is landscape irrigation. Water feature evaporation. Decades ago, we did dumb things. Lots of people did dumb things back in the 80s and 90s, and allowing man-made lakes to be constructed so that people could have lakefront property in the middle of the driest desert in North America was a really bad idea. But guess what? It happened. We can't exactly drain them, but we can stop them from happening any more than we have. Evaporative cooling, much, much bigger deal than most people think, because it's invisible. Export products, if you think about what a bottling operation is doing, it's really taking our water supply and shipping it somewhere else 12 ounces at a time. And then septic systems. As I mentioned, if water goes down a drain and in any house in the valley, we get it back, except for houses that are on septic. And so we've put some rules in place to address that. Go ahead, please. All right, landscape irrigation. To my knowledge, and somebody give me a shout out in the Q&A if this turns out not to be true, I believe that we are the first municipality in the US, at least city scale, to ban grass in residential properties, front and backyard. If you're going to move in and build a house in Southern Nevada, you can no longer install grass anywhere, period, full stop. Grasses are only allowed at schools, parks, and cemeteries. And frankly, if I had my way, cemeteries wouldn't be on that list, but I don't always get my way. And then we have, for this existing inventory of hundreds of millions of square feet of turf in the valley, we actually passed a state law that says you cannot use our water supply to irrigate that turf after 2026. So all of the office parks and all of the HOAs and all of the hotels with big lawns, that's all going away because they cannot use our water supply to irrigate it. So that, or they better buy a lot of bottled water. Go ahead, please. So evap cooling, if you think about it, think of if any of you have ever been to Vegas, you probably stayed at one of the resorts, and the resorts are generally what they call a podium, a big giant resort casino that's attached to a high-rise tower. And to cool those, from their perspective, the most efficient way to do it is evaporative cooling. Cooling towers, without getting into the weeds, for those of you who don't know, they don't actually make the building cool. That's not their job. A cooling tower's job is to scrub off some of the heat from the returning water in the loop that does make the building cool. So essentially, it's just a way of making the compressors work more efficiently. And so again, do they work? Yep. But in this environment, not a luxury that we can afford. You can take a single wet cooled data center can use 300 to 400 million gallons of water a year consumptively. A high-rise casino can use a couple of 100 million gallons of water a year consumptively just on the cooling towers. And so what we have done is we've dropped the first domino in a series of dominoes that will lead to an evaporative cooling ban region-wide in Southern Nevada. And so it's going to be in the water service rules, and it's going to be in building code. And that's going to happen really by the end of 2026 with some milestones between then and now. But the idea is you're going to have to use air-cooled systems for your giant warehouses. You know, that one warehouse that you see on the bottom right there, that's about a 250,000 square foot warehouse. Those swamp coolers have as big as consumptive water footprint as about 5,000 new homes that are built to efficiency standards. And they are building warehouse after warehouse after warehouse after warehouse. So you got to stop the bleeding. The other thing that we do is we recognize that there's this huge inventory of evaporative cooling systems, right? There's more than 1 million tons of cooling tower capacity in the valley. There's more than 30,000 industrial grade swamp coolers in the valley. We are paying pretty handsomely for companies to go in and replace those units with air-cooled units. And if you do the right things, there are some mitigation measures you can take that will prevent it having a significant energy penalty associated, because that's why people like evaporative cooling, is because it's more energy efficient. And we're all about energy efficiency here, but water scarcity is right in our face. So that has to be the priority. And then we're working with them for mitigation measures that will reduce their energy footprint associated with having air-cooled systems. Go ahead, please. One of the interesting things that we found, I talked about the man-made lakes, which was just dumb. And those aren't allowed anymore and haven't been allowed actually since I think we changed that rule in 2003. One of the things that we discovered, though, these unintended consequences, is that when we put a prohibition on planting grass at in new homes, which is just a couple of years old, the really high-end building community went, oh, no worries. We have another plan. We call it poolscaping. And the picture you see is nothing. We were seeing plans for 4,000 and 5,000 and 6,000 square foot pools basically surrounding these mansions like a moat. And it was because it looked pretty. I mean, most of these aren't even first homes. They're not even owner occupied. They're a visiting home for a couple of times a year. And so we had to put a stop to that. Of all of the things that we have done in the last couple of years, and we've done a lot of things to upset a lot of people, I don't think anybody got more bent out of shape than the high-end pool builders, because they were making a fortune off of building these giant pools with what do they call them, wet decks completely surrounding the house and all kinds of stuff. So but this is, we either have to do this or we have to say you're not building the house at all. And so, you know, you have to take some common sense measures, because again, if you think about it, if you have a brand new hotel resort and all its consumptive footprint, if you've dry cooling it and it just has the 1 or 2 swimming pools that serve the guests and some landscaping, not including turf, that giant mega resort has a tiny consumptive water footprint. And the same goes for these houses. Doesn't matter how big the house is, how many showers they have, none of that stuff matters because we're getting all that water back. It's really just the grass and the poolscaping that we don't get back. And so that's why we've put those restrictions into effect. Go ahead, please. I mentioned export products. One of my favorites is Ocean Spray. They have a big factory here, and they're actually very good sports. They've done some very innovative things in terms of their cooling technology, but there's no getting away from the fact that their market for the product they make here with our water supply is Australia. So I'm like, what are you guys doing? You're shipping our water supply to Australia, 2 liters at a time. And that's the reality of it. So we are developing right now 2 things. One is a large water user policy that'll put pretty severe constraints on their ability to consumptively use water. Again, we don't mind if people rent a lot of our water, we just don't want to sell it to them, right? So if they use a lot of water, but they return most of it through the sanitary sewer system, we're okay with that. It's the ones that are taking our water and not giving any of it back that are problematic. So we're working through a large water user policy, and then a new concept we've built called the water investment rating, so that economic development officials can say, what kind of industries make sense in this community? And I'll give you one example. Historically, most data centers have been wet cooled. Again, really, really big number, hundreds of millions of gallons of water a year for cooling. We have a new data center coming to town. And in fact, I am flying up to Salt Lake to see their other facility on Thursday. And they are entirely dry cooled. And I asked them, well, why did you do this? When everybody else is wet cooling, and the CEO said, we're operating in the desert Southwest. It would be ridiculous for us to wet cool this facility, and we have figured out a way to do it with only a nominal change in our energy use. So the technology is there. What's been a little lagging is the willingness to adapt to the environment, but we're getting there. Go ahead, please. And then finally, septic systems. Essentially, we've laid down the law and said, if you're on your own groundwater rights, because people still have granted groundwater rights that don't belong to the municipal system, if you're on that, have your septic if you want it. But if you are on our water supply using our water, you are going to return the indoor portion. And so that's one of those things that makes a lot of sense, but it's actually really expensive in practice because you have to run sewer lines out between those homes and the nearest main. And so we're actually trying to get some funding to help that process along, because it is expensive for the homeowner, and we appreciate that fact, but we're not going to give a municipal water service without a sewer connection. Go ahead, please. And again, I often joke that nobody has spent more money trying to sell less of their product than the SNWA. We have invested hundreds of millions of dollars just in the incentive side alone to get people to convert from grass to drip irrigated landscapes, which we have numerous studies that have shown they use 75% less water for the footprint, even with fairly dense plantings. Because you got to think of it this way. If you were trying to come up with a less efficient way of irrigating plant life in a windy, low humidity, hot environment than spraying water into the air and hoping some of it lands where it's supposed to, you couldn't come up with a worse way. But if you have a drip irrigation system, that water is going exactly where it needs to go, and it's going there in a slow enough pattern that it seeps into the ground right at the root base, rather than spilling out over into the street or doing any of those other things. So it's much, much more efficient. We found right at 75% more efficient. So we provide a lot of knowledge resources to our customers. So in addition to just throwing money at them to try to get them to do a thing, we have a partnership with an irrigation monitoring service, essentially, that they can sign up for, and it tracks what their irrigation system is doing versus what it should do based on the composition of the landscape and all that sort of thing. We have contractor training for all contractors. We actually have a certification program. We have efficiency assessments. That's a new thing that we are working on, where we're bringing in irrigation experts to help golf courses and other large turf irrigators, like huge master HOAs, optimize the use of water, because it saves them money in their water bills, and it saves us that consumptive water. And then we have recently expanded our program where you don't just have to go from grass to drip irrigated plants. You can go from a cool season grass. People like to plant fescue here for some reason, over to warm season grasses that go dormant in the winter, because we get a savings, depending on how they do it, of between 25 and 30% on those. And then artificial playing surfaces. Every single high school football field in the valley has been converted to artificial turf. And they love it because the old turf grounds, the turf quality was bad. They were having gopher problems, all kinds of stuff that really affected playability, and they are loving the artificial playing surfaces. And so we're actually expanding that. In fact, we're working with UNLV, the university here right now, to convert their baseball and softball field as well. And the Clark County School District, which does all K through 12 stuff, they want to start converting their soccer fields and other athletic fields as well. Go ahead, please. So, our view here is that things are bad, as you saw by the early resources slide, and they're not going to get any better. I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. We are not, from our perspective as a water agency, we are not in drought. We are experiencing the permanent aridification of the desert Southwest, and that includes the Colorado River Basin. And so you can either leave or you can get with the program. And we have decided to get with the program and do everything we need to in order to make our community as resilient as it can be. As I mentioned, we have a very, very limited allocation of water, and that allocation is actually shrinking due to the shortages from the federal government, which are associated with drought. It's a reasonable thing to do shortages. And so the difference between what we use now and that number is our headspace. That's how many businesses and people and all that we can continue to accommodate. Well, that number, you can accommodate a lot more if you are really managing your consumptive water uses, because it doesn't matter how many houses you build, it matters how much landscape that you're irrigating, for instance. So we believe that if we take all the right steps without any significant hardship on the residents here, that our water supply can be secure at least for the next 50 years. I think that's our last one. Go ahead, please. Yep. I'll turn it back over.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. So at this point, we're going to do the questions and discussion. If you have any questions, please do type them into the Q&A box. I see we have a few already, so let's get started. The first one is for JC. When recapturing water for reuse, you must lose some due to evaporative losses. Typically, that's like 10 to 20% lost in each phase of treatment. And do you know how much is lost in your process?
Yeah, less than 1%. It's a largely enclosed system. And so and they filter out even out of the settling ponds at the end. So they are wringing every drop of water they can out of that sponge, so to speak. And so we're operating at just slightly north of 99% efficiency.
Nice, thank you. Another question that came in is asking about the data center. Is it NOVA by any chance?
The new dry cool data center? Yes, it is.
Awesome. And another question I see is, how does artificial turf contribute to heat islands in the areas where they are installed?
It depends on the artificial turf, right? This is not the Houston Astrodome AstroTurf of the 1970s. And so they have new varieties that don't absorb and then emit nearly as much turf. Most of what we're seeing, and we have folks that are a lot smarter than me at our organization who work on climate change and urban heat island effect. Most of what we're seeing exacerbating that situation here are rooftops and dark colored asphalt, which I don't know why they do that. I'm from Florida and we always used light colored materials for roadways, but they don't do it here for some reason. So that's what we're seeing exacerbating the urban heat island effect. And that, frankly, that's one of the reasons that when we do, you have to think about the scale of the artificial turf. It's a relatively small number. You're talking about playing fields and that kind of things. Most of the turf that's going to get replaced is going to get replaced with drip irrigated plants and trees. And we actually have a requirement that they install a minimum amount of canopy coverage in the area that's been converted from turf, in large part. Other than the functionality and the aesthetics, we're concerned about the urban heat island effect, and we don't want to exacerbate it. So what we found from a recent study is that we're actually getting, we require 50% canopy coverage. We're actually averaging better than 102% of canopy coverage, because as these trees mature, they're spreading out over the sidewalks and the neighboring streets and all that kind of stuff in ways that turf never did. Go ahead.
Great, thank you. Next question is, SN is hot and will continue to get hotter. Does an artificial turf intensify the heat within your region?
Again, as I just answered, it's such a small footprint. And if you look at the, I guess it depends how you slice it, but however you slice it, the answer is no. I mean, the percentage of total turf area that would get replaced with artificial turf is tiny. And the percentage of total turf as a function of all landscaped environment is tiny. And the percentage of all landscaped environment as a percentage of total developed area is pretty small. And so the answer is it's inconsequential.
Great, thank you. Next question I see is, when you convert turf to artificial surfaces, how are you mitigating for the hot surfaces and playability?
Playability isn't actually an issue, because if you think about when you are using artificial turf, for instance, for football, it tends to be in the fall. And believe it or not, it's not always hot here. In fact, it's actually a little bit of chilly today. And so those fields tend not to get used very much in the June through August periods, which are where it's brutally hot here in those months. But that's not the usage season. The usage season comes after that. And then typically, like for the football fields, for instance, they tend to get utilized at night, because it's after all of the classes are done, kids gone home, changed, gone back to football practice. So we haven't seen any, and then of course all the games are at night too. So I haven't seen that. Boy, this crowd really likes or doesn't like artificial turf. One of those three things.
Great. Next question is, are you allowing synthetic turf areas to be irrigated at all? Many areas here still have irrigation for maintenance, especially dog run spaces.
We haven't seen, at least not through our programs, any artificial turf for dog run spaces. The answer is no dedicated irrigation systems, but we understand that they have to be washed periodically. And so people will use, like the school district uses high pressure washers and goes through and cleans them periodically. So it's not like you're not applying any water ever, but they don't have like dedicated irrigation systems to them.
Great, thank you. Next question is, what do your water fines look like for customers who water outside of their allocated 1 day per week?
So it varies a little bit by jurisdiction, but the largest jurisdiction is the Las Vegas Valley Water District, which covers Las Vegas and unincorporated Clark County. Fines start at, or the fees start at $80. They're assessed directly on the water bill. We used to do fines, like actual legal system fines. Now we've gone to fees. Starts at $80. Everybody gets a warning shot. So we tell you that it's coming, and that give you a chance to correct it. If you choose not to within a 14-day period, then we're going to tap you. And then if you want to really be obstinate about it, every month that you do not correct the issue, we double it. And we keep doubling it until it hits what, like $12.80, I think.
Great, thank you. Next question is, are there any plans to curb housing growth?
Well, this is a little bit tricky, and people always think it's cop out, but it's not. We're a water planning agency, and when we don't have the ability to serve development anymore, we won't serve development anymore, and we'll tell everybody. But the reality is we do have the ability to serve development. And so we have constrained ourselves to managing what does the consumptive water footprint of a new home look like? Because if you do all of the things right, it's a really nominal water footprint on a per home basis. And so, that's why we've put the rules in saying no grass front or back, no pools greater than 600 square feet. So mandatory watering schedules. And some people don't want to live by those rules. And if they don't want to live by those rules, we're fine with that. Live elsewhere. We're good with it. But while we don't have the ability as an agency to essentially intervene in local municipal planning and building decisions by cities, county, et cetera, what we can do is through our member agencies, we can dictate the water use of that new development. And that we found that to be pretty effective.
Great, thanks. Next question is, are there incentives to remove water features and pools from landscapes?
Yes, actually, we will. If so, some people have pools and they've sort of turned into Arkansas ponds. They're all green and covered with stuff. And that's in addition to being a safety hazard, it's not great for insects. And so we will pay people to essentially retire or fill in their pool. Water features. Yes, we've done a few actually on golf courses. One of the things that we do is we have water budgets for golf courses. And in fact, we just got through ratcheting those down. That was a bunch of fun outreach too. And so we have ratcheted those down by about 30%. And one of the approaches that golf courses are taking is saying, we don't really use that pond over there for irrigation. It's just for looking at. And so we're going to retire that pool and fill it in with native landscape or drip irrigated plants or something that use a lot less water. And we will help pay for that.
Great, thank you. And this looks like it may be our last question. So it is, what is the ordinance or law that banned outdoor water features? California is building surf parks in the Mojave Desert.
So we have those built into the water agency service rules. That we found that was the cleanest way to do it rather than through building code. We just built it into the service rules, say we will not supply water to these things. And so if somebody was interested and wanted to go to lvvwd.com, so that's Las Vegas Valley Water District, they could look in the service rules or use the search tool and actually find the one related to water features and how we restricted it. And again, I think that was 03, it might have been 04, but I think that was back in 2003 that we restricted those.
Awesome, thank you. And one did just come in. So it is, what is the process of converting traditional HOA approved landscapes to more water-wise landscaping and ways to encourage the HOA to approve a water-wise approach?
Well, we're actually, because of that new law, the HOAs are having to remove well over 100 million square feet sometime over the next 5 years. So we've been working with them. The first thing we had to do is there were actually HOAs that seemed to believe that they could mandate the installation and maintenance of turf grass. So we put a stop to that because even HOAs are subject to state regulations. So we went, knock it off. Our rules supersede that. So, in other words, an HOA cannot prevent one of their residents from converting from grass to a drip irrigated landscape. We're not going to let that happen. And then now the HOAs themselves are having to make the conversion. And while aesthetically, we know that a lot of their customers like the aesthetic of that, where they want to pretend they live in Indiana instead of in Southern Nevada. But what's interesting is most residents, like the majority, and the last time I checked, it was a 7-to-1 ratio, want the HOAs to take out the grass because they recognize the climate that we live in and are like, no, there are plenty of ways that are aesthetically pleasing to landscape our property and not have it use that much water. And then from a dues perspective, it actually benefits both the HOA and the homeowners because water is typically a pretty large portion of their expenses for the HOA. So it's kind of a win around, but it takes a little while to get people on board. I have given literally hundreds of presentations to HOAs, some receptive, some not so much.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so we have time for one more question, and it is, do you have a typical cost for turf reduction per square foot?
So yeah, it's a little bit outdated. I did the study in 2020, and we found that our incentive covered approximately 65% of the no kidding cost to convert. So that's their all-in cost. What we found is that their all-in cost at the time were like in the $4.40 per square foot range. I suspect that if I went back and did another survey, because in order to do it, I literally called everybody that did a project on the non-residential side and asked them how much they paid and then calculated it based on square footage. If I did it now, I suspect we'd be well over 5 because one of the effects of this new law is that now people are rushing to convert their landscapes, which increases demand, which of course, with supply staying stable, is going to increase prices. So nurseries, landscape contractors, everybody are jacking their prices a bit in response, which is unfortunate, but that's why I tell everybody, don't buy the last seat on the bus. It's going to be expensive.
Oh, great. Well, thank you, JC, and thank you for everyone for asking your questions. We'll turn it over to Sarah.
Awesome, thank you. That was a really thoughtful discussion, so I'd like to thank everyone for participating. I did answer this question within the chat, but I want to make sure, I guess, everyone sees it. We do post these webinars on the AWE YouTube channel, and you can find all of our previous webinars, the links for them through the WaterSense website as well. And someone particularly asked for the links that we included within the PowerPoint, and we can definitely include those in a follow-up email. All right, so back to the slides. Some of you may already be WaterSense partners, but we might be new to others. Our program depends on our partners to carry the message of water efficiency to businesses and consumers. Many of the utility and government organizations on the call today fall into our promotional partner category, but we have several other partner types, including manufacturers, retailers, distributors, builders, certification providers, and professional certifying organizations. Next slide, please. So I want to encourage all of you to become a WaterSense partner. It is free. And with a partnership, you gain access to tons of outreach materials to help communicate the importance of water efficiency and promote WaterSense labeled products. We truly view our partners as a partnership, and we want to help each other really reach our missions and create water efficient worlds. Next slide, please. If you are an irrigation professional, consider one of our WaterSense labeled certification programs. These programs offer certification in irrigation system design, installation, and maintenance, and irrigation system auditing. Currently, over 2,800 professionals have been certified by WaterSense labeled programs across the country. These certified irrigation professionals are listed in our directory of certified professionals on the WaterSense website. And if you are if you are a property manager looking to improve your landscape, you can use that directory of certified professionals to search for an irrigation contractor in your area. Next slide, please. And finally, I'd like to ask all of you another poll question. Hopefully you are finding these webinars to be beneficial, and we would like your input on potential topics for the future. And if Katie could launch that last poll, you should be able to see a box, and please let us know which one you prefer. And of course, you can always just type in the Q&A if you have, I guess, another preference or topic. Okay, we can close that out. Excellent. Thank you so much for your feedback. Ooh, a really mixed result. May have to just flip a coin. But hopefully we'll do all those topics in the future. And that's all I have for you all today. And oh, excuse me. There is one more poll question. Thank you, Katie. I forgot about this one. Please let us know if you need proof of attendance and we will send proof. Give you one more moment to respond to this one because I know it's an important one. Okay, I think we can close this one out. Thank you. All right, well, I got ahead of myself, but again, that's all we have for you today. I'd like to thank you all for joining us, and I'd like to thank JC for being our speaker today. It was a really interesting presentation, in my opinion. And yeah, we'll see you all soon.